Kevin, wanted to ask you about what it's been like covering these stories and why you think there's such a deafening silence around it.
Well, yeah. So I think that first, let me say thank you to Medea and John. It's great to be able to be part of this panel, and thank you for organizing this telethon event. It's extremely crucial what we're doing here. And just in general, before I get to your question, I wanted to throw out my own opinion about the distinction between Donald Trump and Barack Obama. I get a lot of pushback from people who seem to think that it's the same. There's not really any difference, and in fact, they'll point to the grand jury investigation, and they'll say that that was opened against Julian Assange. So Donald Trump charging Julian Assange is not that much different because they were investigating Julian Assange, and because there was this cloud of investigation that ultimately drove him to seek asylum from the Ecuador government. And I just would say that we have to be very specific about the timeline of events and what actually happened. We can point to charges being entered against Julian Assange by the Trump Justice Department. We can't find an identical example under Barack Obama. There simply aren't charges on the record from the Obama administration that were brought against Julian Assange. And so like that right there is enough in my head to say that there's a difference. And the other thing is, as activists, we have to be sensible and recognize that this difference is something we can leverage to get the outcome we want for Julian Assange. The fact that it's Barack Obama who chose not to prosecute Assange is something that you can mention repeatedly until you finally get the result that is necessary, which is dropping the charges, because that's somebody who's part of our team. Well, not my team necessarily, but like the team of people that care. Like this, the fact that, you know, if Barack Obama was the person who started the investigation against Assange, I would tell you that this struggle would be astronomically more difficult, and we might not even have a chance. And so that being said, you know, my experience covering this and with journalists is just that for the most part, people who are in the media do feel what you talk about, Katie, and what Matt Taibbi talks about, that ick factor. They really do feel that if they touch this, they are going to be in trouble, that it's going to jeopardize their ability. I feel like they think they're going to get blowback from their audience. There's just so much propaganda out there about Julian Assange. I would wager that almost 90% of what we think we know about Julian Assange is mostly propaganda. At least what people think. I mean, I'm a reporter, so hopefully what I am putting out there isn't propaganda. Hopefully what I'm reporting is something that I can substantiate and share with people based on things that are true and from sources and people who are advocates who truly are good for Julian Assange and WikiLeaks, and they're not there to demonize him. But I think most of what we know, what we think we know, whether it involves the Podesta files or whether it involves the Swedish case, which I know is such third rail that we just avoid it. But honestly, I think it's to the detriment of all of us that we treat it as such a third rail, because there are some incredible due process issues with what the Swedish prosecution authority did that we make our job even more hard when we ignore it and pretend like it didn't exist. You know, that being said, I think, you know, what we need to do here is exactly what John was saying, is to personalize this, to boil this down to those things that make it really easy for people to tap into and care about this story and to stand up for it. This is a father. He has 2 children. He has a partner. He is being kept in a prison in indefinite detention, and he's being treated in an extraordinary way, especially considering that what he did Even if you believe in decarceration and restorative justice, he has not been accused of any violent crime whatsoever, and yet he's being held in Belmarsh prison during a pandemic where we know there have been outbreaks in the facility. He was spied on by UC Global, a private security company that targeted journalists on behalf of, we believe, the CIA. It's a massive scandal that only Spanish media seems to really care about because there's a Spanish case that has been filed in Spain against.
And it's a Spanish company.
Because it's a Spanish company against, and primarily the director, David Morales, is the one who's in trouble for that. Right. But this is something that if you talk about the treatment and the way they went after Julian Assange, you should be able to get people to see that this was about destroying a family. This was about finding out who the identity was of babies who were being brought into the embassy. This is about identifying who was the lover of Julian Assange so they could go after. So this is classic for people who have followed the history of activists and organizing in the United States. We know that this is how the national security state works to demonize people. So it's very classic in the way that this contractor went about targeting Julian Assange. Finally, I would just say that this is a bit of a nitpick, but I think it's interesting for our conversation. Most of the time, when you hear journalists in the media talk about this case, they will call Julian Assange the source, or they will call Julian Assange a whistleblower, or they will say he's the leaker. And it's very deliberate what they're doing there. But I also want to say that it's impossible for him to be the leaker because he's not working in any of these agencies. He doesn't have access to this information. He's not the one who has chosen to disclose this information to the public. He's the publisher. He's the journalist. He's the person who is taking the risk with his organization to do the work necessary to have the security, to authenticate the documents, to make sure they're not forgeries. And WikiLeaks has a pretty, I think, 99.99% record of being able to verify the authenticity of all the documents that they've ever filed on their website. There's maybe only a handful of documents you can question, and they didn't make any news headlines, so they don't really matter. And that's his job. And so I think it's up to us to do this work. This telethon is important because we're destigmatizing Julian Assange. We're demystifying all of this. Our politicians, the elites, have made him out to be this boogeyman figure. And then with our work, which can be difficult, we are going to tear all of that apart so that people can see the essence of what Julian Assange did and what WikiLeaks does and appreciate it again. Because they did before the elites got to it. And then now the next generation of people only know Julian Assange based on how elites teach them about Julian Assange and WikiLeaks. It is up to us to unravel that.
Can you actually, since you brought this up and you said that we avoid the Swedish case to our detriment, can you give a quick overview of what that is?
I find people still harp on that.
Yeah.
I find that he still gets referred to as in some sort of sexual predatory way, even though that was a complete fabrication. And that has lingered. And I think that they knew that would linger. And I think that that's one of those things that keeps the sort of liberals sort of anti-Julian Assange.
Yeah, or it's an excuse for them too. But Kevin, can you shed some light on that?
Yeah, and I have a very Me Too safe answer for how this is what we should say. This is the way it was. They started and stopped the investigation into Julian Assange no less than 3 times. No less than 3 times did the Swedish prosecution authority open and close, open and close, and open and close the investigation. And there technically weren't ever any charges issued against Julian Assange. There were allegations that they were investigating. They were told not to go to the Ecuador embassy. The prosecutors were told that they couldn't go to the Ecuador embassy and question Assange in the embassy under treaty or agreements that that Sweden has with the UK, because the British government actually applied pressure to prevent the Swedish prosecutors from coming to the UK to have that. They wouldn't allow for. So then there was some conversation over whether they could do this virtually with Julian Assange in the embassy. We know a lot of these details thanks to journalist Stefania Marizzi, who I know you talked to for Useful Idiots. And she's, I just want to give her quick credit on this show. She's one of the only journalists I know who has had the guts to push Freedom of Information Act requests against all the governments implicated in this entire scandal of this case against Julian Assange. But finally, I would just say that if you care about the women that and whatever went on in the bedroom, that night with Julian Assange, if you care about that, if you care about valuing their experiences and believe that, again, like, let's just pretend like I don't know anything about who these women are, and I know that there's been some claims about whether one of them's compromised by the U.S. government or not. Let's just pretend like, let's set that aside. Let's pretend like these are just women who had a bad experience with Julian Assange. If you want to value them, then what the Swedish prosecution authority did is the absolute wrong way to take care of people who are bringing sexual allegations, because you're allowing a case to be politicized and manipulated by world governments for the purpose of keeping a publisher in limbo who has been exposing corruption by a powerful government. And so I think that it's pretty simple. It's pretty simple. If you want to talk about this, you raise the due process issues and you connect the due process violations to the due process violations that are existent right now in the extradition case and some of the other inequities that are existent in this case that has been brought against Julian Assange.
Thanks for watching. If you want to support our mission to transform politics into service, please like this video, subscribe, follow us on social media, and consider joining our Patreon, where you'll get early access to our interviews as well as other exclusive content. Links are in the description. Peace out.